Jungkook's quiet confession shattered the silence, but Taehyung's cold reaction left fans speechless. What happened between them that night? You don't even flinch anymore, do you? Jungkook's voice cracked, low and bitter, as he stood under the sharp glare of backstage lights. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was suffocating. Taehyung didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even look at him. The corridors behind the main stage were a labyrinth of hurried footsteps, static radios, and stage managers whispering about countdowns, but in the corner where Jungkook and Taehyung stood, time had collapsed into stillness. Jungkook's hand, still clutching the sweat-damp collar of his jacket, slowly dropped. He exhaled a breath that shook his entire frame. I said... He stepped forward, jaw clenched, every syllable lined with years of betrayal and love not returned. Some bonds break. Nothing. No reaction. Taehyung's eyes were glazed, like he had already left the conversation before it began. A storm raged in Jungkook's chest, years of memories spun like broken film reels. The hotel rooftops in Tokyo, the stolen glances in rehearsal, the things never said because the silence between them felt safer than the truth. But tonight, the silence had become a weapon. The final song of the night still echoed in Jungkook's ears, a haunting melody of unity and togetherness that felt like a lie when he looked at Taehyung now. The same man who used to press a palm to his chest when words failed him. The same voice that once whispered, "You're never alone." That voice hadn't spoken to him in days. Jungkook's knuckles went white. Say something. A flicker passed across Taehyung's face, just a twitch of the lips, barely visible. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. Jungkook turned his back to him, but only after locking eyes for one final second, searching for proof that whatever they had wasn't already gone. He found none. The hallway swallowed him up, leaving Taehyung leaning against the wall, still unmoved, still breathing but eerily still. Somewhere behind the layers of rehearsed indifference, a truth sat buried, one Taehyung refused to touch. The dressing room door shut hard behind Jungkook. The slam echoed, but Taehyung didn't even blink. Jimin entered the corridor moments later, his gaze bouncing between the hallway and Taehyung's statue-still form. He looked like he was crying, Jimin said gently. He always looks like that, Taehyung replied. His tone was unreadable. Jimin frowned, stepping closer. You know this isn't just about now. I know, Taehyung muttered. His voice betrayed nothing, but his clenched fists told a different story. Inside the dressing room, Jungkook sank onto the bench, face buried in his palms. The scent of sweat, makeup, and cheap air freshener clung to the space. It was ironic this was where the bond had been built. During long rehearsals, cracked jokes, and hidden confessions whispered when the rest of the world wasn't watching. And now, it was breaking here too. He reached into his bag and pulled out an old photo, one he still carried for reasons he couldn't explain. It was a snapshot someone else had taken, years ago. Him and Taehyung, laughing at something stupid, arms slung around each other like gravity itself didn't matter. Jungkook stared at it, jaw trembling. What happened to us? He whispered. He wanted to believe the bond could be mended, that this wasn't the end. That silence didn't mean detachment. But when a bond breaks, it doesn't always make a sound. Sometimes it just stops existing. Taehyung remained in the hallway, alone now, eyes closed. He could still feel Jungkook's words echoing in his skull like a scream trapped inside glass. Some bonds break, but not all broken things stay broken forever. Even if he didn't react now, the fracture was real and deep and bleeding beneath the surface. The hotel suite was cold, too cold for the season. Jungkook stood by the window, forehead pressed to the glass, watching the blur of Seoul's lights stretch endlessly beneath him. His breath fogged the pain in slow, uneven intervals. He hadn't spoken since they got back from the venue. No one had. Jimin sat curled in the corner of the couch, phone in hand, but not really using it. Hoseok had said goodnight early, sensing the tension the way animals sense storms. And Taehyung. Taehyung never came back to the suite at all. Jungkook's reflection in the window looked like a stranger eyes rimmed with unshed questions, mouth tight with all the words he didn't say when it mattered. He replayed the moment again, his own voice saying asterisk, some bonds break, asterisk, cutting through the noise like broken glass. And Taehyung expression unreadable, body still, like Jungkook was just another ghost in the room. He'd hoped for anger, for a shout, for a shove, something, anything, but nothing came. And now, all that was left was this heavy, metallic silence. Jimin finally spoke. He didn't leave the building, you know. Jungkook turned his head slightly, but said nothing. He went up to the rooftop. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. You saw him? I followed him. Jimin's voice was low. Careful. He didn't see me. The image hit Jungkook harder than expected. Taehyung alone on the rooftop, above the city's noise, staring out like he was somewhere else entirely. And maybe he was. Maybe Taehyung had already left long before any of them noticed. He didn't cry, Jimin added after a pause. But I think he wanted to. Jungkook exhaled, slow and bitter. What does it matter if he won't speak? Jimin stood, slipping his phone into his pocket, stepping closer. It matters because you still care. The words landed heavy. Too true to deny. Jungkook looked away, throat tight. I wish I didn't. But you do. Outside, the streetlights flickered. A car passed. Somewhere far below, a siren wailed. But in that room, it was only the sound of two friends standing in the wreckage of something sacred. Across the city, Taehyung stood at the edge of the rooftop of their hotel, arms crossed, shoulders hunched beneath a hoodie pulled low. The wind bit into him, but he didn't move. His phone buzzed in his pocket again. He didn't check it. He wasn't sure what he was waiting for. Maybe for the cold to numb the ache. Maybe for the past to explain itself. He pulled out the same photo Jungkook had. The same one, he knew, because they both had a copy. Taehyung had slipped it into Jungkook's bag himself years ago, the night they swore nothing would ever come between them. Not the fame, not the schedules, not even themselves. He laughed bitterly now. Liar, he murmured. The rooftop door creaked open behind him. He didn't have to turn to know who it was. Can't sleep? Namjoon's voice was always gentle at times like this, like wind smoothing out broken waves. Taehyung shrugged. Didn't try. Namjoon moved to stand beside him, not pushing, just existing, offering presence. Jungkook's not okay, he said quietly. I know. He thinks you don't care anymore. I know that too. Namjoon paused. Do you? Taehyung's silence was long. Thick. Then, I care too much, that's the problem. Namjoon didn't respond right away. He knew the cracks in their group better than anyone. He'd seen the fault lines forming months ago, too many missed conversations, too many swallowed words, too many moments where pride won over truth. He needs to hear it, Namjoon said gently. Taehyung's jaw tightened. And I need to believe he won't walk away again if I say the wrong thing. That's the risk, Namjoon replied, but silence is a choice too. Taehyung looked out over the city again. It looked peaceful from above. Quiet, but he knew better. The most dangerous storms never made a sound until they broke everything. Jungkook stared at his phone for a long time before he finally picked it up. His thumb hovered over Taehyung's contact. Just one tap. Just one message, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he typed out a note to himself. Something raw. Something unfiltered. Asterisk. I miss who we were before we forgot how to talk to each other. Asterisk. He didn't send it. He just stared at it, then locked the screen and set the phone down. Behind him, Jimin had fallen asleep with a hoodie pulled over his head, curled in the same spot like he was trying to disappear. The room felt like a graveyard of unspoken things. Jungkook walked to the bathroom, turned on the cold water, and splashed his face. The mirror showed him someone who looked exhausted, not just physically, but deep in the soul. His fingers traced the edge of the counter. Then he whispered to the empty room, I don't want to lose him. The lights flickered once. In the rooftop's quiet darkness, Taehyung finally pulled out his phone and stared at Jungkook's contact. His finger hovered over the call button. He didn't press it. Instead, he opened their old chat buried under months of silence. He typed, asterisk. Do you remember Tokyo? Asterisk. Then deleted it, typed again, asterisk. I shouldn't have let you walk away. Asterisk. Deleted that too. Finally, he typed, asterisk. Some bonds break, but some bend. Asterisk. He stared at the message, then turned the screen off without sending it, because sometimes the hardest thing isn't saying what you feel, it's choosing times to say it. And both of them, for now, were still caught in that terrifying in-between. The morning sun was ruthless, bright, loud, and utterly indifferent to the ache Jungkook carried in his chest. He sat on the edge of the hotel bed, shirt half-buttoned, eyes fixed on the floor like it held the answers he couldn't find in Taehyung's silence. The concert press schedule buzzed on the nightstand, his phone lighting up every few minutes with reminders, interviews, makeup calls, but none of it felt real. None of it mattered. What mattered was that he hadn't slept, that the room still echoed with things unsaid, that Taehyung had yet to walk through the door, and Jungkook, he wasn't sure what he would do if he did. He dragged himself into the bathroom, the cold water no longer sharp enough to wake him from the dull storm inside. His face in the mirror looked older, like the weight of disappointment had finally left a scar. A knock at the door startled him. He froze. Every part of him wanted to believe it was Taehyung, that maybe, just maybe, he had decided to answer, but when he opened the door, it was staff. Hyung, 10 minutes until car pickup. He nodded silently, closed the door, and leaned his forehead against it. The door between him and the world. Between him and Taehyung. He dressed in silence, moving on autopilot, each layer of clothing, another piece of armor against the inevitable. Downstairs, the lobby buzzed with organized chaos coordinators, managers, camera crews already prepping the day. Jimin spotted him instantly and walked over with a coffee in hand. "You look like hell," Jimin said, handing it to him. "I feel worse." "Did he call?" Jungkook shook his head, eyes hollow. "I don't think he will." Jimin hesitated. "He might, but I don't think either of you knows how to reach for each other anymore." Jungkook looked down at the coffee cup. The lid trembled slightly in his hand. "We used to know." "I know." Jimin's voice softened. "But grief changes the shape of love. And neither of you admitted that you were grieving." Jungkook met his eyes. "Grieving what?" Jimin didn't answer right away. Then he said, "The version of each other you used to be." Meanwhile, across the city, Taehyung sat on the steps outside an old, closed cafe. One they used to go to when no one knew their names. He hadn't meant to come here, it just happened. Like muscle memory. The metal bench was cold against his back, but he didn't move. His phone sat on his lap, untouched. He had 5 missed calls, none from Jungkook. He hated the part of himself that kept checking. He hated more that Jungkook hadn't texted back. Asterisk, "You should have said something." Asterisk, the thought echoed, louder than the traffic, louder than the birds. But what would he have said? That he panicked the moment Jungkook looked at him with that pain in his eyes? That he'd been angry too, but didn't know how to say, "I'm sorry," without breaking more things? That every time Jungkook walked into a room, he still looked for him, but now with dread instead of warmth? He wasn't good at explaining feelings. He was good at deflecting, at masking, at using silence as a shield. But silence had turned into a wall. His fingers hovered again over the message he had typed the night before. Asterisk, "Some bonds break, but some bend." Asterisk, "Still unsent." He backspaced the entire thing. Then, finally, slowly, he typed, asterisk, "I didn't react because I was afraid. You still mattered too much." Asterisk, he stared at it. The truth burned. He hit send. Jungkook felt it before he even looked. A vibration in his pocket. A shift in gravity. He was already sitting in the van, heading to the press venue, the world moving around him like a blurry mess. When he pulled out his phone and saw the name, something in his chest cracked. His fingers hesitated over the screen. One message. One sentence. Asterisk. "I didn't react because I was afraid. You still mattered too much." Asterisk. His breath hitched. For a moment, the noise around him, the traffic, the chatter, the hum of tires disappeared. Jungkook read the message again, and again, and again. He typed nothing in return. Just sat there, phone in hand, staring out the window, eyes stinging. Because in those few words, Taehyung had finally said what Jungkook needed to hear. But it didn't erase the pain. It didn't fix the shattered nights or the suffocating silences. It only meant there was still something worth grieving. Still something left between them. Broken, maybe, but not lost. Not yet. The press venue was all flashing lights and rigid smiles. Jungkook stepped onto the carpet beneath a flood of camera shutters, every move calculated, every glance rehearsed. The noise was overwhelming, journalists calling out names, fans cheering behind barricades, flashes going off like strobe lights. But none of it reached him. Not really. Not after that message. Taehyung's words haunted him like a whisper pressed to the back of his neck. Asterisk, "I didn't react because I was afraid. You still mattered too much." Asterisk, "Too much." Jungkook adjusted his mic, forced a polite smile as the host introduced them one by one. His heart wasn't in it, but his professionalism was unshakable. It had been built over years of survival, of showing up even when the weight inside him made it hard to breathe. Taehyung was late. The host's smile faltered only for a second before smoothly moving on, trying to distract the crowd with light jokes. But Jungkook's eyes flicked toward the entrance over and over, each time finding only strangers. The others noticed. Namjoon leaned slightly toward him, speaking under his breath. "He's coming." Jungkook didn't reply, didn't trust his voice. The interview began. Standard questions, tour expectations, music direction, collaborations. They answered on instinct. Smiles in place, rehearsed chemistry, laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes, and then movement. A figure slipped through the side entrance, casual and quiet, but every pair of eyes in the room noticed. Taehyung. Late, calm, like the world hadn't cracked open between them just hours ago. He walked to his spot beside Jungkook without looking at him, nodded at the host, apologized lightly. Jungkook didn't turn, didn't breathe, until Taehyung sat down beside him and said nothing. The interview continued, but the air between them was charged, almost painful, and when the host asked a question about the meaning of unbreakable bonds within the group, the room seemed to hold its breath. Jungkook didn't answer first. Neither did Taehyung. It was Jimin who saved the silence. "Unbreakable doesn't mean untouched. We've all been tested," he said gently, eyes flicking between the two of them. "But I think the bond survives when you choose to return to it, even after it breaks a little." There was a pause. Jungkook's throat tightened. Taehyung's jaw moved, almost imperceptibly. The moment passed. The interview ended. Applause. More flashes. More noise. And then they were backstage again, surrounded by people, but alone in a hallway that echoed too loudly with everything they hadn't said. Taehyung stood by the water cooler, fingers tapping against the paper cup, not looking at Jungkook. Jungkook walked past him once, then stopped, turned back. Their eyes met, and it was too much. "I read your message," Jungkook said quietly. Taehyung's fingers still. "I figured." The silence pulsed between them again, thick and unyielding. "You mattered too much," Taehyung repeated, softer this time as if the words ached in his mouth. Jungkook stepped closer. "Then why did you act like I didn't?" Taehyung looked at him, really looked at him. "Because I didn't know how to hold on without losing parts of myself." Jungkook's breath hitched. He hadn't expected honesty, not like this. Taehyung leaned against the wall, voice strained. "We changed. You needed more. And I shut down. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I didn't move, things would stay the same. They didn't. I know." Jungkook crossed his arms, as if holding himself together. "Do you regret it?" Taehyung didn't answer right away. His eyes glistened under the soft hallway lights. "I regret not fighting harder." Jungkook's guard slipped, just slightly. "So, fight now." Taehyung looked up. "Don't run," Jungkook added. "Don't disappear when it gets hard." "I don't want to," Taehyung whispered. "But I don't know how to fix this." Jungkook stepped forward again, closer this time. "Then don't fix it. Just don't let it go." Their shoulders nearly brushed. And for the first time in what felt like years, Taehyung nodded. "I won't." Behind them, the sounds of crew members packing up echoed through the corridor. But in that quiet pocket of space, something began to shift. Not healed, not whole, but real, and still holding on. The van ride back to the hotel was thick with silence, but it was a different kind this time. Not the heavy, aching kind that made it hard to breathe. It was quieter, tentative, like the sound of two people beginning to listen again, even if neither of them knew what to say yet. Jungkook sat on the left, forehead resting against the tinted window, watching the blur of Seoul drift past under city lights. Taehyung sat on the right, hands in his lap, gaze fixed ahead. Between them, the empty seat had never felt more meaningful. Neither a wall, nor a bridge. Just space. Raw and uncertain. They didn't speak the whole way back, but when the van stopped and the others began to climb out, Jungkook remained seated. He looked down at his fingers, flexed them once, then looked over. "Come up?" he asked softly. Taehyung paused, then nodded. They walked side by side, steps quiet in the hotel hallway, the echo of their shoes bouncing off the marble like a quiet memory. Taehyung didn't ask which room, they both knew it would be Jungkook's. That was always the place where things got real, where the walls weren't mirrors for cameras or polished for the press. Once inside, Jungkook didn't turn on the main light. Only the lamp beside the bed cast a soft amber glow, making the room feel small and safe. Familiar. Taehyung lingered near the door, unsure. Jungkook didn't sit. He stood by the bed, arms crossed, chest rising slowly. "I thought you hated me," he finally said. Taehyung looked up. "I thought you didn't trust me anymore." "I didn't." Taehyung flinched. "But it wasn't because of you," Jungkook continued. "It was because of how quiet you got, how far away you went." "I was scared," Taehyung confessed. "You were changing. Fast. Everyone saw it. You were flying, Jungkook. You didn't need me the same way." "That's not true." "It felt true." Jungkook let out a low, bitter laugh. "That's the thing, isn't it? We started assuming. I thought you didn't care. You thought I didn't need you. So we both just left." Taehyung walked further into the room, slow steps, hands in the pockets of his jacket. "But I watched everything. Every performance. Every stupid clip. Even the rehearsal footage they didn't release." Jungkook's eyes widened slightly. "I never stopped," Taehyung said. "I just didn't know how to step back in." There was silence. And then, "You could have just knocked," Jungkook said, voice small. "I didn't think you'd open the door. I almost didn't." Taehyung smiled faintly, eyes glistening. Jungkook sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees. "You were the only one who really knew me. Not the version on camera, not the polished one, just me." Taehyung sat across from him on the small couch, leaning forward. "I still know you." Jungkook looked up. "Then tell me who I am." Taehyung didn't hesitate. "You're stubborn when you're hurting. You hide behind humor when you're drowning. You hate apologizing, but you always show it in your actions. You sleep with music playing low because silence scares you. And you can't eat spicy food late at night, but you do it anyway because you think pain means you're still alive." Jungkook's throat tightened. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you miss me?" Taehyung swallowed hard. "Every damn day." Neither of them moved. The room was so quiet they could hear each other's breathing. Then Jungkook reached down and pulled something from the nightstand drawer. It was the photo, the one they both carried. "I still have it," he said. Taehyung stood slowly, walking over. He looked at the photo, then at Jungkook. "I still carry mine too," he said softly. "It's creased, worn, but I never threw it away." They stood there, side by side again, staring at the proof that once before the fame twisted them into strangers, they had chosen each other. "I don't want us to be a memory," Jungkook whispered. Taehyung reached up and touched Jungkook's shoulder. "Then let's not." And for the first time in months, Jungkook leaned into the touch instead of retreating. Not everything was healed. Not everything was perfect. But, for now, the bond had bent and refused to break. The rain began just past midnight. It was light at first, a delicate patter against the windows, almost soothing in its rhythm. Jungkook sat curled in the corner of the bed, hoodie pulled over his head, knees drawn close, the soft sound wrapping around him like a blanket. Across the room, Taehyung stood by the window, one hand resting on the glass, eyes lost in the glowing reflections of the city skyline beneath the drizzle. Neither of them spoke for a while. Words weren't needed yet. The silence between them, once sharp and heavy, had softened into something tender, fragile, honest. It was no longer about who spoke first or who broke what. It was about allowing the moment to breathe. "I didn't sleep for days after Busan," Jungkook murmured suddenly, voice low. Taehyung turned, brows slightly furrowed. "That last show, when we stood on opposite ends of the stage," Jungkook continued, still not looking up. "I kept turning my head, waiting for you to meet my eyes. You didn't." Taehyung's lips parted, then closed again. "I thought it was over," Jungkook whispered. "Not just the group, us." Taehyung walked slowly toward the bed, sitting on the other side, just far enough to give space, but close enough to feel real. "I didn't know how to look at you," he admitted. "Not after what I said, or didn't say." Jungkook's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the blanket. "What did you think I wanted from you?" "I thought you wanted more than I knew how to give," Taehyung said, looking down at his own hands. "Not just support, not just loyalty, but clarity, something I wasn't ready to find in myself." The air trembled with the weight of that honesty. "I never asked you to be perfect," Jungkook said, voice thick. "I just wanted you to stay." Taehyung's eyes flicked up, full of regret. I thought staying while being unsure was worse. You were wrong. I know that now. They fell into silence again, the kind that trembled with everything they still had to unpack. But they weren't running anymore. Not tonight. Taehyung lay back slowly on the bed, hands resting behind his head. Do you remember our first show in Japan? He asked suddenly. Jungkook blinked, the memory sparking instantly. When I forgot the last chorus and you ad-libbed to cover it? Taehyung grinned. You looked like you were about to cry. I was. I thought I ruined the whole night.
You didn't, and I remember thinking, if I can have his back like this forever, I'll be okay. Jungkook turned to face him, his expression softening. Then why did we stop? Taehyung stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Because somewhere along the way, we forgot we were fighting the world together, and we started fighting each other instead. Those words cut deep, because they were true. They had let pressure build, let resentment ferment, let silence do the talking, and in the process, they forgot what it meant to hold on. I miss being stupid with you, Jungkook said quietly. Taehyung chuckled under his breath. Like that time we dyed our hair at 3 a.m. and blamed Jimin for it. Or when we tried to cook and almost set off the fire alarm. Or that night we walked across the Han River barefoot, pretending we were filming a drama. They both laughed now, full and real, the kind that vibrated in the ribs, the kind they hadn't shared in far too long. And then slowly the laughter faded, but the warmth stayed. Jungkook reached out, pulling the blanket over both of them. You don't have to have it all figured out, he said, voice near a whisper. Just don't disappear again. Taehyung turned his head, eyes searching Jungkook. I won't. Their foreheads rested close, breaths mingling in the soft glow of the lamp. Outside, the rain grew heavier, but in that room, something light bloomed again. Not perfect, not healed, but stitched back together with fragile threads of truth and choice. And that, for now, was enough. Morning light spilled softly into the room, filtered through sheer curtains that swayed gently with the breeze from a cracked-open window. The rain had stopped, but the streets below still shimmered, fresh with reflection and the faint scent of petrichor in the air. Jungkook stirred first. His hoodie had slipped halfway off during the night, revealing the edge of a faded scar near his collarbone, one Taehyung remembered, but hadn't seen in months. It wasn't just a physical mark. It was memory, a remnant of a late-night accident during training, back when they still danced on borrowed time and slept in rehearsal rooms, back when everything was raw and new. Jungkook blinked slowly, eyes adjusting to the quiet. Taehyung was already awake, lying on his side just inches away, watching him. Not intensely, not with tension, but gently, like someone memorizing something they thought they'd lost. Did you sleep? Jungkook asked, voice rough with mourning. A little. Me too. Their eyes didn't leave each other. Taehyung broke the silence first. You move a lot when you're not sleeping well. Jungkook gave a soft, embarrassed smile. Yeah, that hasn't changed. I used to wrap my leg over yours just to keep you still. Jungkook laughed under his breath. You did. They let the moment stretch between them, unhurried, tender. Then Taehyung asked, do you remember what you said to me in Osaka, the night we sat on that rooftop with the ice cream? Jungkook furrowed his brows. I said a lot of things. Taehyung nodded slowly. But you said, even if we become strangers in front of the world, don't ever be a stranger to me when the cameras are off. The memory slammed into Jungkook like a wave. His eyes flickered. I meant it, he said, voice quieter now. Taehyung sat up, back against the headboard. Then why did we? Jungkook exhaled, rubbing his face with both hands. Because we thought surviving separately was safer than collapsing together. Taehyung's heart twisted. But I didn't survive, not really. Jungkook looked up. Neither did I. They sat like that for a while, one upright, one still curled beneath the blanket. No scripts, no walls, just two boys, turned men who had loved each other in more ways than they could explain and broken each other in more ways than they were ready to admit. A knock on the door broke the spell. Neither moved at first. Then Jungkook rose slowly, padding over to the door in socks, and opened it slightly. It was Namjoon, holding coffee and looking both relieved and surprised when he saw who else was in the room. "Hey," he said gently. "Hey." "Hayoung line meeting in 20 minutes. Jungkook nodded. "We'll be there." Namjoon paused. "We." Jungkook stepped back slightly, revealing Taehyung on the bed, the blanket pooled around his waist. Namjoon blinked once, then gave the faintest smile. Not smug, not teasing, just hopeful. "Okay," he said and turned away. When the door closed again, Jungkook leaned his back against it. Taehyung spoke, his voice even. "Are we okay showing this again?" Jungkook looked at him. "We don't have to explain anything to anyone," he said, "but we also don't have to pretend anymore." Taehyung stood, walking over, stopping only when they were eye to eye. "No pretending," he said softly. "Not with you." Jungkook's fingers curled at his sides. "Then stay close this time, even when it gets hard, especially then." "I will." Taehyung raised a hand, brushing Jungkook's cheek with his thumb. "You were never a stranger to me, not once." And Jungkook closed his eyes, for just a second, and let himself believe that maybe, this time, they would get it right. Not by going back to who they were, but by choosing each other again. In full daylight. The meeting room was quiet when they entered. Namjoon sat at the head of the long table, papers neatly stacked in front of him. Jin, Yoongi, and J-Hope were already there, mid-conversation, but every voice paused when the door clicked open, and both Jungkook and Taehyung stepped in side by side. There was no announcement, no performance, but the shift in energy was immediate. Everyone noticed the way Jungkook didn't look away from Taehyung this time. The way Taehyung walked with a steadiness he hadn't shown in weeks. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Yoongi raised a brow and looked at Jin, who simply smiled faintly and went back to sipping his coffee. Namjoon nodded toward the empty chairs. "Sit, we've got a lot to go over." They did. Tour reschedules, solo promotions, festival rumors, press concerns, the weight of the world neatly itemized on bullet points and timelines. But Jungkook kept stealing glances. And every time, Taehyung met his eyes. For the first time in months, they were synced in silence. It wasn't until the meeting was wrapping up that J-Hope leaned over to Jungkook and whispered, "You good now?" Jungkook nodded but then paused, "Getting there." Hobei smiled, soft and proud. "Took you long enough." After the meeting, the others filtered out in pairs and threes, casual and light. But Taehyung lingered behind, leaning against the doorframe as Jungkook gathered his notes into a messy stack. "I forgot how loud these meetings get," Taehyung said, a lazy smile on his lips. Jungkook didn't look up. "You used to make them louder." "I might again." Jungkook finally turned to him. "Promise." Taehyung gave a mock salute. "Scout's honor." They both laughed quietly, a shared sound that didn't echo. It just stayed between them. Later that afternoon, they slipped out unnoticed through the back of the building. No staff, no cameras, just hoodies, sunglasses, and the familiar rhythm of walking close without touching. They ended up at an old record store tucked into a side alley near the river, the kind of place they used to escape to when they needed to feel like nobodies. It smelled like dust, vinyl, and a bit of nostalgia. Perfect. Jungkook ran his fingers over the edge of an old turntable. "Remember when you made me sing along to those 70s records?" "You were off-key," Taehyung grinned, flipping through a stack of jazz albums. "You were worse." Bold lie. They shared another quiet smile, one that belonged entirely to them. In the back corner of the shop, they found a small listening booth with 2 old chairs and a tape player that barely worked. It was cramped, and the audio crackled, but neither of them cared. Jungkook sat with his eyes closed, letting a soft blues melody play through the buzzing headphones. Taehyung leaned against the glass, arms folded, watching the way Jungkook's fingers tapped lightly in time with the beat. And for a second, just one, they weren't idols. They were just 2 people trying to find their way back to each other through sound, silence, and everything in between. Taehyung broke the moment gently. Do you still write? Jungkook opened his eyes. Sometimes, when I can think straight. About us. Jungkook hesitated. I tried too, but the words always felt like they'd cut too deep. Try again. Jungkook looked up. With you. Taehyung nodded. They sat there until the music stopped, until the tape hissed and clicked, until the world outside faded. That night, back in the hotel, Jungkook pulled out a notebook from the bottom of his suitcase, one he hadn't touched in months. Its pages were half filled with lyrics he never finished, verses scratched out with frustration. But this time, he didn't write alone. Taehyung lay across the other bed, scrolling on his phone, occasionally humming a line Jungkook mumbled out loud. They worked like that for hours, not chasing perfection, just trying to say something true. At one point, Taehyung rolled over and said, I've got a chorus. Jungkook blinked, sing it. And when Taehyung did, low, imperfect, full of emotion, Jungkook didn't stop him, didn't correct, just listened. Because healing didn't come all at once. Sometimes it arrived in broken melodies, shared in dimly lit rooms. In laughter between lyrics. In glances that said asterisk, I'm still here. And finally, in the sound of two voices beginning to harmonize again. The demo was raw. Unpolished, half-whispered, imperfect. But it was theirs. The next morning, Jungkook and Taehyung sat side by side in the studio, a small room tucked behind layers of soundproofed glass and forgotten cables. The kind of room they used to sneak into after midnight, long before the world expected them to be anything more than just two boys who loved music, and each other, in ways they were only beginning to understand. Jungkook leaned over the laptop, cursor hovering over the waveform on the screen. It's messy. It's real, Taehyung said, his voice soft but certain. They played it back again. Their voices layered unevenly, Jungkook's sharper in the chorus, Taehyung's deeper notes grounding the verses. There were mistakes, slips, moments where emotions cracked through the melody. But the truth was woven into every second. The chorus had been Taehyung's idea, simple, vulnerable. Even if we lose the words, even if the lines don't rhyme, just stay. Stay in the silence with me. Jungkook had written the bridge in 5 minutes, scribbled on the back of a receipt while Taehyung slept curled on the couch. Some bonds break, but some learn how to bend. And now, sitting in the dim light of the mixing board, they listened to themselves, bare, unmasked, and finally brave enough to let the pain become melody. Taehyung reached over and adjusted a knob, lifting the reverb on the final harmony. Jungkook glanced at him. You still remember how to do that? I never forgot, Taehyung murmured. There was something about the way he said it, like he wasn't just talking about music, and Jungkook heard it, felt it. They didn't speak for a long time after the demo ended. Instead, they sat in the quiet hum of the room, hearts beating to an invisible rhythm only they could feel. Later that afternoon, the managers called for content meetings, video shoots, behind-the-scenes promos, live-stream plans for the comeback. Jungkook and Taehyung were split into separate rooms. It wasn't intentional. It never was. But Jungkook felt the space again the moment Taehyung was pulled away, already answering someone's question about concept colors. He excused himself halfway through the meeting. Walked the hall alone. And found Taehyung on a balcony, talking to a staff member, wind brushing his hair back in waves. For a second, Jungkook just watched. The way Taehyung nodded patiently. The way his fingers tapped the railing like he was playing a melody in his head. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. The staff bowed and walked off. Taehyung looked over his shoulder and caught Jungkook staring. You good? He asked. Jungkook stepped out into the breeze. I didn't like being in a room without you. Taehyung blinked. We've done that for months. Yeah, Jungkook said quietly, and I hated every second of it. There was a pause. Then Taehyung said, I keep waiting for this to fall apart again. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. Why? Because it always does. We get close and then something breaks. You pull back, I freeze, we drift. Jungkook took a step closer, their shadows nearly overlapping. Then maybe this time we don't let go, even when it gets ugly. Taehyung looked at him, really looked. Do you think we can unlearn the distance? I don't want to unlearn it, Jungkook said. I want to replace it. Taehyung's breath caught. With what? With whatever this is. Jungkook's voice shook, but he didn't hide. Us, now messy, honest. Taehyung didn't reply. Instead, he reached up and gently fixed a loose strand of Jungkook's hair. It was a small gesture, but it said everything. That night, a notification pinged across both their phones. The group chat. Yoongi heard your demo, raw as hell. Don't you dare touch that chorus. Jin, it made me tear up. You two idiots better perform that live or I'll steal it. Namjoon, that bridge, damn. Jimin, I've been waiting for this. For you, for both of you. Hobai, group harmony comeback, let's go. Jungkook looked over at Taehyung. Did you send it? Taehyung smiled. I wanted them to hear it, hear us. Jungkook swallowed hard. What if the world hears it too? Let them. Silence stretched again, but this time it buzzed with promise. Hope. Taehyung pulled the notebook back into his lap, flipping to a clean page. Let's write the second one. Jungkook raised a brow. Already? Yeah, Taehyung said, eyes shining. Because this time I'm not walking away mid-song. Jungkook reached for a pen. This wasn't a reunion. It was a resurrection. Of melody. Of trust. Of two voices learning how to meet again, note by imperfect note. It was the final night of the tour. The air inside the stadium buzzed like electricity. 50,000 voices trembled in anticipation, their glow sticks lighting up the dark like a sea of stars. The stage was massive, bathed in soft blue hues, smoke swirling at the edges, LED screens playing flashes of past performances, memories from a decade that had shaped not just music, but millions of lives. Backstage, Jungkook stood in front of the mirror, earpiece in, chest rising and falling in slow, controlled breaths. The weight of the moment pressed into him, not the pressure to perform, but the deeper pressure to be honest, to be real, to finally give something that wasn't filtered through choreography or carefully crafted lyrics. Taehyung stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes locked on Jungkook's reflection. Still time to back out, Taehyung said quietly. Jungkook met his gaze through the mirror. Not this time. Their custom outfits shimmered subtly in the light, but they weren't showy. They'd chosen simplicity tonight. No masks, no distractions, just them and the song they wrote from the pieces of everything that had nearly broken them. Namjoon peeked in from the side curtain. 2 minutes. Jungkook gave a short nod. Taehyung didn't move. Jungkook turned to him. You ready? Taehyung's eyes flicked over his face, studying every scar, every breath. Then he said, I'm terrified. Jungkook smiled. Me too. They walked toward the stage together. The roar was deafening when they stepped into view. Armies screamed, cried, reached, sang. But all Jungkook saw was Taehyung at his side. All he heard beneath the ocean of sound was the beat of his own heart sinking to something that had been lost and was now being reclaimed. The first half of the concert went by in a blur of fire, sweat, and harmony. They performed as a unit again, not just in formation, but in spirit. The others felt it too. Jimin's radiant grin, Jin's soft glances toward the mid-song, Namjoon's grounding presence between sets. Even Yoongi cracked a rare smile after a particularly intense verse. But everyone knew what was coming. The screens dimmed, the lights fell away. Jungkook stepped forward alone. I wasn't sure we would ever sing this, he said, his voice echoing through the quiet crowd. This isn't just a song, it's a truth. The first chords played, gentle, stripped down, just a guitar and a soft hum of synth. Taehyung walked out to stand beside him. No dancers. No effects. Just them. Jungkook began the verse. His voice trembled slightly, but he didn't pull back. Every word bled emotion. I tried to write a letter, but the ink refused to stay. I tried to scream your name, but silence got in the way. Taehyung followed, low and warm like dusk. We broke without a shatter, we fell without a sound. But somehow, here we are, still standing on this ground. The crowd was dead silent. Some fans had already started crying. The chorus hit like a soft wave. Even if we lose the words, even if the lines don't rhyme. Stay in the silence with me. Cameras caught Jungkook's hand brushing against Taehyung's, not held, just barely touching. But it was enough. And then came the bridge. The one line that hadn't changed since that night in the hotel. Some bonds break, but some learn how to bend. Taehyung sang it. And Jungkook closed his eyes. Because this was no longer a performance. This was a confession. A promise. An apology. A resurrection. When the last note faded, there was no applause at first, just stillness. Then the entire stadium erupted. Not with noise, but with a chant. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jungkook bowed low, body trembling. Taehyung placed a hand gently on his back, steadying him. Under the glare of the stage lights, under the watchful eyes of fans and cameras and the world, they didn't say anything. They just stood there. Together. No longer strangers on stage. No longer pretending behind choreography. Just two voices, once broken, now whole. And as the confetti rained down, Jungkook leaned over and whispered, just loud enough for Taehyung to hear. We didn't fix the past. Taehyung smiled softly. No, we're building the future. And the music began again. The confetti clung to their hair like stardust. Jungkook could still feel the tremor in his chest as he stepped back from the center of the stage, breath shallow, body humming not from exertion, but from the rawness of what had just happened. The lights faded into a slow blue glow, soft and dreamlike, while the chants from ARMY began to melt into murmurs of disbelief, awe, love. Behind him, Taehyung hadn't moved much. He stood where the final note had dropped, head tilted up slightly as if still listening to the last vibration of the chord in the air. When Jungkook turned, their eyes met in the haze. And that look, it wasn't for cameras, it wasn't for fan service, it wasn't for show. It was a silent, sacred recognition. They'd done it. Together. The backstage crew rushed forward as soon as the curtain closed, handing them towels, water bottles, voices buzzing around in quick congratulations. But it all felt distant, like the sound was coming from underwater. Jungkook's ears were still ringing, not from the speakers, but from the emotion, from the pounding of his heart, from the way Taehyung's voice had cracked during the bridge and the entire stadium had gasped in sync, feeling the ache with him. They walked off stage in silence, shoulders brushing. In the dressing room, no one spoke at first. Jimin was the first to reach for them, pulling Jungkook into a hug so tight, so immediate, it made him choke up all over again. He didn't cry. Not quite. But his arms wrapped around Jimin like he was anchoring himself. Then Hoseok came next, wiping sweat from Taehyung's temple with a towel, smiling like he had known this was going to happen all along. You were right, Hoseok said quietly to Taehyung. It had to be messy. Taehyung's laugh was soft, almost breathless. That's the only way we do it. Namjoon leaned against the wall, watching them with eyes that shimmered, not just with pride, but with relief. He had held too many broken pieces for too long. He had watched from the sidelines as the space between them widened, always trying to hold the bridge in place with his words, his presence. And now he saw it, how they had finally chosen to cross that distance on their own. Don't let it fall apart again, Namjoon said, not as a warning but a plea. We won't, Jungkook replied, not looking away from Taehyung. Jin burst in with a bouquet someone had thrown on stage, shaking off the petals that clung to his shoulder. Okay, who cried? He teased. I saw at least 3 armies sobbing when you hit that last line, not sure if it was heartbreak or healing. Both, Yoongi grumbled, tossing his in-ears on the couch. God, that bridge, you two had no business going that hard. Taehyung looked at Jungkook, and Jungkook smiled. We needed to feel it, he said. After showers, after the final rundown with the press team, after the last-minute signature on some release forms, the chaos slowly dimmed. Members filtered out in 2s and 3s, heading back to the hotel or to late-night meals with their families. Jungkook stayed behind. So did Taehyung. The venue was quiet now. Dark in hallways. Echoes of footsteps in empty dressing rooms. They walked the perimeter of the stadium in silence, slipping through the rows of seats like ghosts revisiting a memory they had only just created. Jungkook ran his fingers over the plastic seats, remembering the first time they played a venue half this size, remembering the letters fans held up, the screams, the tears. "How does it feel?" Taehyung asked. Jungkook stopped walking, like it's the end of something. Taehyung tilted his head, and maybe the beginning of something else. They reached the edge of the stage again, climbed up slowly, shoes echoing faintly on the glossy platform. From here, the sea of empty seats looked both infinite and intimate, a paradox of space, a mirror of everything they had been through. Taehyung sat on the edge, feet dangling over. Jungkook joined him. "I was scared to sing that," Jungkook admitted after a long silence. "I know," Taehyung said. "But I wanted to be honest. I needed to say it in front of everyone." "You did." "I think they knew. They always do." They sat for a long time, watching the lights of the stadium slowly shut off, section by section, until only the glow from above the stage remained, casting a soft halo around them. "Do you think we'll ever go back to the way things were?" Jungkook asked. Taehyung shook his head. "I don't want to." Jungkook turned to him, surprised. "I want to go forward," Taehyung continued. "Not back. Back was full of silence, avoidance, fear. And forward." Taehyung looked over, eyes gentle, honest. "Forward is us, choosing again, every day." Jungkook nodded slowly. That word, choosing felt heavier than any promise. They didn't speak for a while after that. But when Taehyung leaned his head on Jungkook's shoulder, it didn't feel like a grand gesture. It felt like breathing. And when Jungkook let his head rest on top of his, it felt like peace. Not performance. Not reconciliation for the cameras. Just peace. In the days that followed, the performance went viral. Clips from fan cams flooded social media, unedited, shaky footage that somehow captured the emotion more truthfully than the high-resolution broadcast version. Armies around the world posted reactions, tears running down their cheeks, screaming about the look, the touch, the bridge, the way Taehyung waited for Jungkook to finish breathing before singing his line. Interviews were requested, labels called, music shows reached out asking if they would perform the song again. But they didn't rush. They let the song breathe. Instead, they stayed quiet online, letting the music speak for them. One evening, they returned to the studio, not to record but just to sit. Jungkook lay on the floor, hoodie pulled low over his eyes, feet tapping silently to some rhythm in his head. Taehyung sat with a sketchpad, doodling nonsense symbols and notes on the corner of a lyric sheet. "I think," Jungkook began, "I want to make an album about this." Taehyung glanced up. "About what?" "About how we fall apart and choose to return." Taehyung was quiet. Then he said, "Let's not write it for anyone else. No labels, no charts. No expectations. Just us." Taehyung nodded. "Then I'm in." Jungkook smiled. Outside, the city pulsed with noise and headlines and chaos. But inside that quiet studio, Jungkook and Taehyung, for the first time in a long, long while, were building something real. Not for the world. Not even for ARMY. But for the two of them, who had once been broken by the silence between them, and now were finding melody again in its place. And as the night deepened, and they played the demo on loop for the 100th time, Jungkook turned to Taehyung, voice soft, full of wonder. "Do you think some bonds were meant to break?" Taehyung looked at him, eyes warm. "No," he said. "I think some bonds break so they can come back stronger." And this time, there was no silence. Only harmony. The studio lights were dimmed to a golden hue, casting soft shadows across the hardwood floor. Outside the window, the Seoul skyline blinked with 1,000 lives, but inside that room, it was quiet, sacred almost. Jungkook sat hunched over the mixing board, one hand resting gently against his jaw, his gaze fixed not on the screen, but on the space between him and Taehyung. That space had changed. Not long ago, it was a chasm, wide, cold, filled with hesitation, regret, unanswered messages, and swallowed pride. Now it was different. It was warm, unspoken, charged with the kind of intimacy that didn't require explanation, just presence. Taehyung sat cross-legged on the couch behind him, strumming softly on an acoustic guitar. He wasn't playing anything specific, just letting his fingers wander across the strings, his mind clearly elsewhere. Every so often, he would glance up at Jungkook as if checking to see if he was still real, still there, still choosing this moment. Jungkook finally broke the silence. Do you ever think about how close we came to losing this? Taehyung looked up, a soft exhale escaping him. Every day. Jungkook turned his chair to face him fully. What would you have done if we hadn't spoken again? I don't know, Taehyung admitted. I would have kept singing, kept living, but I think something inside me would have stayed frozen, unfinished. Jungkook nodded slowly. Same. He stood and crossed the room, sitting down beside Taehyung on the couch. The guitar between them quieted. They sat in the silence for a moment, shoulders brushing, breath sinking. You know, Taehyung said, voice low, I used to write letters to you. Jungkook turned toward him, eyes wide. You did. I never sent them, he said, lips tilting slightly. But I wrote them, when I missed you, when I was angry, when I couldn't figure out what went wrong. Jungkook's throat tightened. What did they say? Taehyung met his eyes. All the things I was too scared to tell you in person. Things like, I'm sorry for the way I let you think I didn't care. Or, I saw you trying to hold it all together and I hated myself for watching you do it alone. Jungkook blinked fast, his hand instinctively reaching out to grip Taehyung's wrist. Why didn't you ever send them? He asked. Because I thought if you didn't answer, I wouldn't survive it. Jungkook looked down at their hands. You would've. I wasn't so sure, Taehyung whispered. The room felt too quiet after that, not in a bad way, but in the way that came after a storm. A quiet that invited healing. Jungkook stood up again, walked over to the keyboard near the far wall and sat down. His fingers hovered above the keys for a moment, then he began to play, slow, uncertain notes at first, the bare bones of a melody he hadn't dared finish. Taehyung's voice joined him before he even asked. No words, just humming. Soft, fragile, like a memory trying to find its shape. And in that harmony, Jungkook felt something unravel and rethread itself inside him, a knot he didn't realize he was still carrying. He stopped playing. Taehyung's humming faded. They stared at each other. We should record that, Jungkook said. Taehyung nodded. Let's call it Letters I Never Sent. Jungkook smiled, and then we'll write the response. They worked until the sun began to rise. Not obsessing over perfection, not chasing radio hits. Just building a world between them, sound by sound, lyric by lyric. When the final chorus was done, Jungkook leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling, exhausted and strangely exhilarated. Taehyung, still barefoot, sprawled across the couch, one arm resting over his eyes. You think anyone will understand it? Jungkook asked. Taehyung didn't move. They don't have to. You sure? Taehyung lifted his arm, peeking at Jungkook. I'm sure, this one's for us. Jungkook nodded. And in that, he felt something shift again. Not just between them. Inside himself. He wasn't the same man who had walked out of that interview weeks ago, bitter and broken, whispering, some bonds break, like it was an apology and a verdict at once. He was someone else now. Someone who had broken and chosen to rebuild, not alone, but with the very person he once thought he'd lost for good. Taehyung sat up, rubbing his face. Come with me. Jungkook raised an eyebrow. Where? Just come. They left the studio with the sky still half asleep, the streets damp with morning dew, the world still quiet. They didn't speak much on the drive. Taehyung didn't say where they were going, and Jungkook didn't ask. But when the car pulled up to the beach, the one just outside the city, where they used to sneak away during trainee days, Jungkook smiled. "You remembered." "I never forgot," Taehyung said, stepping out into the cold sand. They walked along the water's edge, shoes in hand, waves lapping at their ankles. The sky above was bruised with pink and gold, the horizon still blinking open like a sleepy eye. Jungkook looked out at the water. "There were so many nights I stood on my own rooftop, wondering if you were thinking about me too." Taehyung's voice was quiet. I didn't know how to come back." "I would have let you." "I know that now." The wind tugged at their clothes. The sea smelled like memory. They stopped walking when they reached a small dune, a place where the beach curved into a quiet crescent. Taehyung sat down first, curling his knees to his chest. Jungkook joined him. "I think we should tell them," Jungkook said suddenly. "Tell who?" "The fans, about us, about the music, about what it really means." Taehyung hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to pretend anymore. Not about the songs, not about where they come from. And if it backfires, then at least we were honest." Taehyung looked at him for a long time. "Okay." And that one word carried the weight of 1,000 fears being let go. They didn't post anything immediately. They waited, reflected, talked. They met with the team, with the members, with the people they trusted most. And when they finally shared their story, through a short documentary, a quiet post, a song that held everything, they didn't frame it as a scandal or a secret. They framed it as a process. A journey. Of breaking, bending, and choosing to return. The response was not what they feared. It was more. More compassion, more understanding, more connection. Fans didn't demand answers. They said, "Thank you for letting us in." And when Jungkook stepped on stage again, weeks later, and sang "Some Bonds Break" with Taehyung standing right beside him, their harmonies no longer fractured but fused. The world didn't erupt with noise. It exhaled. And in that exhale, in that breath shared between artist and listener, between one heart and another, Jungkook and Taehyung found what they had nearly lost. Not just each other, but peace. And from that place, honest, unpolished, vulnerable, they began again. Under the soft glow of twilight, the rooftop was quiet again. The wind carried the scent of the distant Han River and the city's breath, the kind of scent that made everything feel suspended between memory and anticipation. Jungkook stood leaning against the railing, headphones around his neck, a cigarette unlit in his fingers. He didn't smoke, not really, but holding it had become a strange comfort lately. A metaphor, maybe, a way of saying, "I'm on edge," without ever speaking the words. Behind him, the door creaked open and closed quietly. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. Taehyung's footsteps had long ago become familiar in a way that lived in his bones. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city pulsed below, unaware that two hearts were slowly learning how to beat in sync again, not from love songs or stage cues, but from the raw, fumbling way forgiveness always walked before it learned to run. "You're not lighting that, are you?" Taehyung's voice was soft, teasing, but not distant. Jungkook glanced at it, then dropped it into a nearby ashtray and leaned back, looking up at the stars barely visible beyond the haze. "No." Taehyung stepped closer until he was beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "You nervous?" Jungkook gave a breath of laughter, more than I was during our debut. "Then we must be doing something real." Jungkook turned to him. "This doesn't scare you, telling the truth like this, letting them see it?" Taehyung met his gaze. "It terrifies me, but hiding scares me more." Jungkook nodded slowly, looking down at his hands. "We could have kept pretending." "We did that for too long," Taehyung said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And it nearly destroyed us." "I hated myself," Jungkook admitted. Not just because we were distant, but because I kept performing the part of being fine, smiling, laughing, while my chest ached every time I saw you standing next to me, silent. I thought you hated me, Taehyung said. The way you wouldn't meet my eyes, the way you disappeared after interviews, after shoots, I thought you had outgrown me. Jungkook looked up sharply. I never could. That was the problem. I was trying to protect what we had by staying away, because I didn't think I deserved you anymore. Taehyung turned fully to him now, searching his face. You still don't get it, he said softly. You were never the one who left. I did. Emotionally, I shut down. You were still there, fighting, even if it didn't look like it. But me, I let the silence grow. You were hurting. So were you, Taehyung replied, his voice cracking at the edge. Jungkook's eyes shimmered under the rooftop lights. We both were, and we kept thinking we had to do it alone. Taehyung nodded slowly, but now we're here. We're here. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was full of understanding, full of acceptance. Full of the quiet truth that healing didn't mean erasing what had happened, but learning to carry it differently. Jungkook reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, weathered and soft at the edges. What's that? Taehyung asked. Jungkook handed it to him without a word. Taehyung opened it carefully. It was a lyric sheet, one he hadn't seen before, lines written in Jungkook's hurried scrawl, full of crossed-out phrases and revised verses. At the bottom, circled twice, were 6 words. If you call, I'll answer again. Taehyung looked up, heart in his throat. You wrote this? He asked. Jungkook nodded. The week we stopped talking, I never showed anyone, never finished it. I didn't know if you'd ever call. Taehyung folded the paper again, slower this time, reverent. I'm calling now, he said. And that was it. That was the moment everything that had cracked between them began to truly mend. The next morning, the sun rose soft and pink over Seoul. Their new track, Letters I Never Sent had been uploaded at midnight with no teaser, no press release, no curated social media rollout. Just a caption, some truths are late, but they still matter. Within an hour, it had spread like wildfire. Fans flooded timelines with side-by-side comparisons of old interviews, photos from tour stops where Jungkook and Taehyung stood apart, verses they'd written over the years that now made new sense. But most of all, they listened. To every word. Every breath. Every beat where pain slipped into hope. Taehyung read the comments quietly in the passenger seat as Jungkook drove them through early morning city traffic. His hand hovered over his phone for a moment before he slowly set it down in his lap. They get it, he said. Jungkook glanced over. Yeah. Taehyung nodded. They're not asking us to explain, they're just feeling it with us. Jungkook exhaled slowly, a knot inside him loosening. That's all I wanted, he said. For them to understand it wasn't about drama or headlines, it was about survival. About coming home, Taehyung said. Jungkook smiled at the road. Exactly. They drove in comfortable silence for a while before pulling into the studio lot. The building was mostly empty, no scheduled sessions that morning. They liked it that way. It meant freedom, no structure, no pressure. Just them. Inside, the air was warm, still holding the echo of yesterday's melodies. Jungkook turned on the monitors, Taehyung flicked on the lights, and without saying anything, they fell into rhythm. Jungkook tapped out chords on the keyboard while Taehyung thumbed through a stack of lyrics they'd been drafting. Their bodies moved like dancers in sync, not from choreography, but from knowing the shape of each other's silence. Jungkook began to sing. Something new. Something unformed. I watched the rain and wished it was you. Coming back in pieces I'd still choose. Taehyung joined in. We were pages torn, but not thrown away. Still ink in our veins, still things we didn't say. The moment stretched. Real. Honest. Undeniably them. When the song faded, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. This was their story now, not told in press conferences or filtered through stylists and managers, but in late-night harmonies, quiet confessions on rooftops, notebooks passed across the couch, and the constant, steady choice to stay. Stay in the silence. Stay in the noise. Stay when it was easy. Stay when it was not. And somewhere in the hum of the studio lights and the softness of Taehyung's voice beside him, Jungkook finally understood that the line he once whispered so bitterly, asterisk, some bonds break, asterisk, had never meant the end. It had been a warning, a turning point, a doorway. And Taehyung, standing here now, fingers brushing his, humming under his breath, was the proof that some bonds may break, but the ones worth rebuilding always find their way back. Not by erasing the pain, but by honoring it, living through it, and choosing, again and again, to begin.